She stood before a titan of industry, a man whose net worth could purchase a small country, and she was trembling. Not from the cold glare in his eyes or the collective gasp of the room, but from the immense pressure of years of self-imposed silence, a dam of unspoken truths finally cracking under the weight of his contempt. He had called her a nobody, an uneducated girl fit only for clearing plates, a ghost in the machine of his opulent world. But when she finally opened her mouth, it was not an apology that emerged, but a cascade of languages, French, Japanese, Russian, Spanish, each a finely sharpened blade aimed at the heart of his arrogance. In that moment, the man who believed he owned everything in the room, including the people, realized he had made a catastrophic error. He had not just insulted a waitress, he had awakened a past he couldn't possibly comprehend, and in doing so, handed her the very tools to dismantle his empire. What do you do when the person you try to crush is the only one who knows the secret to your ruin? This is where the world tilted on its axis. Clara Mayfield, at 22, had perfected the art of being invisible. It was a skill honed not in theatrical schools, but in the unforgiving corridors of a life she had fled. Her sanctuary was the Gilded Quill, a bastion of old New York money, a place where whispers were more valuable than shouts, and the patina on the silverware was older than most of its patrons. Here, reservations were a legacy passed down through generations, and the staff were expected to be as silent and elegant as the mahogany paneling that lined the walls. Clara, with her dark hair pulled into a severe, functional bun and her movements economical and fluid, was the perfect ghost. She existed in the periphery, a fleeting presence, refilling a water glass or clearing a finished course, her face a mask of polite neutrality. She learned the rhythms of the wealthy, the subtle nod for a check, the almost imperceptible frown that meant the wine was corked, the hollow laughter that filled the space between business deals. To them she was furniture that moved, and for 2 years that was exactly what she wanted. It was safe, it was anonymous, it was a life devoid of the complexities that had nearly destroyed her. Tonight, however, the practiced calm of the Gilded Quill felt different, charged with a brittle, electric tension. The maître d', a stern but fair man named Mr. Dubois, had briefed the staff with unusual gravity. "Alistair Finch is dining with us tonight," he'd said, his voice low. "Table 7. He is particular. There will be no mistakes. Perfection is the only acceptable standard." The name sent a ripple through the room. Alistair Finch was not old money. He was a predator of the new age, a tech billionaire who had built an empire, Omnilink, on the acquisition and monetization of data. He was notoriously abrasive, a man who saw the world in binary, assets and liabilities, conquerors and the conquered. Clara had seen his face on magazine covers, his smile thin and predatory, his eyes holding the cold certainty of a man who had never been told no. She instinctively tried to shrink further into the background, focusing on her assigned tables in the quieter alcoves, far from the central stage of Table 7. She served an elderly couple celebrating their 50th anniversary, their quiet affection a soothing balm against the nervous energy radiating from the center of the room. She moved with practiced grace, her mind a quiet fortress. But fate, or perhaps just bad luck, had other plans. A junior waiter named Leo, barely 19 and perpetually nervous, approached her by the kitchen entrance, his face ashen. "Clara," he whispered, his hands trembling so violently he nearly dropped a bread basket. "Mr. Dubois wants you to take over the wine service for Table 7. My hands. I can't. I nearly dropped the decanter." Clara's blood ran cold. "Leo, no, I'm not on that table. Ask someone else." "Everyone else is swamped," Mr. Dubois insisted. "He said you're the steadiest hand we have." The boy's eyes were wide with panic. "Please, Clara. Finch just berated me for 5 minutes because the water wasn't cold enough." It was a command, not a request. Refusing would cause a scene, the very thing she was trained to avoid. A knot of dread tightened in her stomach. Taking a deep, steadying breath, she nodded curtly. She retrieved the 1982 Chateau Margaux from its resting place, her hands moving with the deliberate precision of a surgeon. The bottle cost more than her annual salary. As she approached table 7, she could feel the shift in atmosphere. It was an island of pure ego, in a sea of refined dining. Alistair Finch sat at the head of the table, holding court. He was a man built of sharp angles and expensive fabrics, his silver hair perfectly coiffed, a gaudy, diamond-encrusted watch flashing on his wrist as he gestured expansively. He was flanked by a nervous-looking lawyer, a woman in a severe black dress who Clara pegged as his COO, and 2 Japanese gentlemen who looked deeply uncomfortable, their polite smiles not reaching their eyes. "The beauty of the Haven Project," Finch was booming, his voice slicing through the restaurant's genteel hum, "is its totality. We don't just provide a service, we create the ecosystem. From infrastructure to data flow, we own it all. It's a closed loop, perfect control." Clara approached from his left, her presence announced by nothing more than the softest whisper of movement. She presented the bottle, her voice a low, professional murmur. "Mr. Finch, the 1982 Chateau Margaux." Finch didn't even look at her. He waved a dismissive hand. Yes, get on with it." She began the ritual, cutting the foil with a clean, practiced motion. As she inserted the corkscrew, her mind, a finely tuned instrument of observation she had long tried to silence, began to work against her will. She noticed the slight sheen of sweat on the lawyer's temple as Finch mentioned perfect control. She saw one of the Japanese investors, Mr. Tanaka, subtly shift his weight, a micro-expression of doubt flickering across his face before being replaced by a mask of placid interest. She noted the COO, Miss Vance, tapping a single manicured finger against her wine glass, a rhythmic, anxious beat. These were tells, data points she had been trained to collect and analyze in a former life. Here, they were just noise she had to ignore. She drew the cork, a perfect, satisfying sigh of air. She poured a small amount for Finch to taste. He swirled it, sniffed it with the exaggerated air of a man playing a part, and nodded. "Fine. Pour." Clara moved around the table, her movements economical. She poured for the Japanese guests, for Miss Vance, for the lawyer. As she returned to Finch to top off his glass, he shifted abruptly, turning to his COO. "Vance, did you get the final specs on the encryption protocols? I want them airtight. No back doors. Not for anyone." His sudden movement caused his elbow to jut out, striking Clara's wrist just as she was pouring. The fine-boned neck of the bottle tipped, and a small, ruby-red splash of wine, no more than a tablespoon, arched through the air and landed squarely on the pristine white cuff of his shirt. Silence. It was absolute and immediate. The ambient noise of the entire restaurant seemed to vanish. Every fork stopped midway to a mouth. Every conversation died. Finch froze, his arm still extended. His eyes, cold and grey as a winter storm, slowly lowered to the crimson stain blooming on his cuff. Then, with a terrifying, deliberate slowness, they lifted to meet Clara's. "Are you an idiot?" he said, his voice deceptively soft, yet it carried across the room like a gunshot. Clara's throat closed. The practiced phrases of apology died on her lips. "Sir, I am so sorry. It was an accident. Allow me to—" "An accident?" Finch's voice began to rise, gaining a sharp, cruel edge. "This shirt is custom-made on Jermyn Street. This wine costs $2,000 a bottle, and you, with your $5 education, have managed to ruin both in a single, clumsy movement. Do you have any concept of the value of things?" The humiliation was a physical force, a hot wave that washed over her, threatening to drown her. She could feel the stares of every diner, 100 pairs of eyes dissecting her failure. Mr. Dubois was already moving swiftly from across the room, his face a mask of controlled panic. "Sir, my deepest apologies," Dubois began, but Finch cut him off with a slice of his hand. "Don't talk to me. Talk to her," he snarled, pointing a finger at Clara. He looked her up and down, his lip curled in a sneer of utter disdain. "Look at you, standing there in your little uniform, pretending to be part of a world you could never understand. What did you do? Drop out of community college? Did you think serving people who actually contribute to society would somehow rub off on you?" Clara's hands, hidden behind her back, clenched into fists, her nails digging into her palms. The old training, the instinct to de-escalate, to apologize, to make herself smaller, was at war with something else, a raw, forgotten nerve that had just been struck by lightning. Finch wasn't finished. He was enjoying himself now, performing for his guests, for the entire room. "This is the problem with your generation. You want everything, but you have no discipline, no knowledge. You think you're entitled to be in this room. But you're not. You're staff. You're replaceable. Do you know what that means?" He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial, venomous whisper. "It means you are nothing." His gaze swept over his guests. She probably can't even string a proper sentence together in English. He then turned to his Japanese investors. "My apologies for this interruption. A minor staffing issue." He said the last words slowly, as if speaking to a child. And that was it. The final straw. The insult wasn't just to her, but to them, to the entire charade of respect he was performing. Something inside Clara, a lock that had been rusted shut for 2 years, finally broke. The fear didn't vanish, but it was suddenly overshadowed by a cold, clear rage. She had spent 2 years erasing herself, believing she deserved this invisibility, this penance. But this man, in his profound ignorance, had just reminded her of exactly who she used to be. She lifted her chin. For the first time all night, she made direct eye contact with Alistair Finch. The polite, vacant mask of the waitress was gone. What looked back at him was something ancient and formidable, and it made him pause for a fraction of a second. She turned her body slightly, directing her attention not to Finch, but to his guests, Mr. Tanaka and Mr. Ito. She bowed her head in a gesture of perfect, formal respect. "Tanaka-sama, Ito-sama," she began, her voice quiet but carrying a flawless, formal Japanese that was as out of place in this context as a diamond in a dustbin. "Hosto no burei na furumai ni yotte, kono yo na jokki o mokugeki saserareta koto o fukaku owabi moshiagemasu. Kore wa kei o arawasu tadashi hohode wa arimasen. I deeply apologize that you have been made to witness this situation due to our host's rude behavior. This is not the proper way to show respect." The effect was instantaneous. Mr. Tanaka and Mr. Ito, who had been stiff with discomfort, straightened their backs. Their eyes widened, first in shock, then in a dawning, sharp-edged understanding. They exchanged a look that spoke volumes. Finch stared, his mouth slightly agape, a flicker of confusion crossing his face. Clara didn't give him time to process. She turned to the COO, Ms. Vance, whose perfectly composed face was now showing a crack of astonishment. Clara switched seamlessly to a crisp, business-like French, her accent pure parisien. Madame Vance, je suis désolé que votre soirée soit gâchée par un homme qui confond sa valeur nette avec sa valeur personnelle. La véritable élégance est dans la manière dont on traite ceux que l'on n'a pas besoin d'impressionner. Miss Vance, I am sorry that your evening is being spoiled by a man who confuses his net worth with his personal worth. True elegance is in how one treats those they do not need to impress. Miss Vance's immaculately lipsticked mouth fell open. She had clearly understood every word. A faint flush crept up her neck. Next, Clara's gaze fell on the nervous lawyer. She had noticed him earlier speaking quietly on his phone in the lobby, a distinctive Moscow accent coloring his English. Now she addressed him in a low, chillingly calm Russian. "Господин advokat," she said, her voice barely a whisper, yet it cut through the silence. "Ваш клиент говорит о закрытых системах и отсутствии черных ходов. Интересно, потому что я слышала, как вы обсуждали целостность денег и протокол обхода на улице. Возможно, jego japońskie partnery hotely by это знать." Mr. Lawyer, your client speaks of closed systems and no back doors. Interesting, because I heard you discussing data integrity and a bypass protocol outside. Perhaps his Japanese partners would be interested to know that. The lawyer went white. He looked as if she had physically struck him. He shot a terrified glance at Finch, then at the Japanese investors who were now leaning forward, their expressions transformed from polite interest to focused, predatory suspicion. Finally, Clara turned back to Alistair Finch. She stood straight, her posture radiating a confidence she hadn't felt in years. When she spoke, it was in perfect, articulate, unaccented English, her voice ringing with the clarity of a bell. "You asked if I finished community college, Mr. Finch. I did not. I was, however, a fellow at Georgetown's School of Foreign Service, specializing in geopolitical risk analysis and linguistics. My focus was on detecting corporate and state-level deception through verbal and non-verbal cues." She took a small, deliberate step closer to the table. The entire restaurant was frozen, a tableau of shock and awe. "You call me uneducated, but you broadcast your insecurities for everyone to see. Your speech is littered with buzzwords to mask a lack of substance. Your posture is dominant, but your eyes constantly scan the room for validation. You denigrate me to assert power over your guests because you instinctively know they don't respect you. They only fear your financial influence." She gestured subtly towards the lawyer. "You speak of having no back doors in your Haven project, yet your legal counsel discusses bypass protocols in the open. A bypass protocol, for the benefit of your investors, is a back door. It's a way to access the perfectly controlled data you plan to collect from the good people of Havenwood, Wyoming. It's a lie, packaged as security." Her eyes met Mr. Tanaka's. "Tanaka-sama, the term he used was protocol obkoda. I believe your own tech security team will understand its implications." Finch's face had cycled through a spectrum of colors, from flushed red to a pasty, sickly white. He looked like a man who had been expertly gutted in public, his insides laid bare for all to see. "You see, Mr. Finch," Clara concluded, her voice dropping to a level of icy calm, "you made a classic, arrogant mistake. You assumed that the person serving you was invisible. You thought that because I wear an apron, I must be deaf, dumb, and ignorant. But I've been listening. I've been watching, and I understand far more than you could ever imagine." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle into the profound silence. "I speak 5 languages, Mr. Finch, and in every single one of them, a man like you is called the same thing, a fraud. With that, she picked up the ruined napkin from the floor, placed it neatly on the table beside his plate, turned on her heel, and walked away. She didn't run. She walked with a slow, deliberate grace, her back straight, leaving behind the wreckage of a billionaire's ego, a shattered business deal, and a dining room full of people who had just witnessed a ghost reclaim her voice. The moment she passed through the swinging doors into the cacophony of the kitchen, Clara's composure shattered. Her legs felt like water, and she braced herself against a stainless steel counter, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The adrenaline that had flooded her system, sharpening her senses and fueling her defiance, now left her shaking uncontrollably. The sounds of the kitchen, the clang of pans, the hiss of the grill, the shouts of the chefs, were a dull roar in her ears. "What did you do?" Leo, the young waiter, stared at her, his eyes like saucers. It went dead quiet out there. Then some guy started yelling. Before Clara could answer, the doors burst open again, and Mr. Dubois stormed in, his face a thundercloud of fury and disbelief. "Mayfield, my office. Now." Clara followed him, her legs still unsteady, through the narrow, chaotic hallway to the small, cluttered office that served as the restaurant's nerve center. Dubois slammed the door shut, the sound echoing in the tiny space. "Are you insane?" he demanded, his voice a strained whisper. "Do you have any idea what you have just done? Alistair Finch, you didn't just talk back to him. You declared war on him. He could buy this building and have it torn down out of spite. He wants you fired, not just fired. He wants you blacklisted from every restaurant in this city." Clara met his gaze. The shaking had subsided, replaced by a strange, unfamiliar calm. "He publicly humiliated me, Mr. Dubois. He called me uneducated, worthless. He threatened my livelihood long before I said a word. And you responded by dissecting him in 4 languages and accusing him of fraud in front of his investors." Dubois paced the small room like a caged tiger. "This isn't about right and wrong, Clara. This is about survival. Our survival." "Then fire me," she said, her voice quiet but firm. The words surprised her as much as they did him. 2 years of cowering, of making herself small, and now this. Dubois stopped pacing and stared at her. "What? If your survival depends on placating a bully like Alistair Finch, then I don't belong here. Fire me. I won't apologize to him. I meant every word I said." The maître d' looked at her, his anger warring with a flicker of something else, begrudging respect, perhaps. He ran a hand over his tired face. "You put me in an impossible position." "I put you in a position to make a choice," Clara corrected gently, "between your most powerful customer and your least powerful employee. That shouldn't be a difficult choice. It should be a defining one." The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken implications. Before Dubois could respond, there was a soft knock on the office door. He opened it a crack to find one of the hosts. "Sir," the host whispered, "one of Mr. Finch's guests is asking to speak with the waitress, privately." Dubois frowned. "Finch is gone. He and his team stormed out 10 minutes ago." He glanced back at Clara, then at the host. "Which guest?" "The older Japanese gentleman, Mr. Tanaka." A knot of apprehension formed in Clara's stomach. She had either saved them or condemned them, and she was about to find out which. Dubois hesitated for a moment, then nodded grimly and stepped aside, allowing the man to enter. Mr. Tanaka was a man in his late 60s, impeccably dressed, with a quiet dignity that Finch's bluster could not overshadow. He dismissed Dubois with a polite but firm nod, closing the door softly behind him. He stood for a moment, simply studying Clara with intelligent, discerning eyes. She braced herself for a reprimand, for being told she had overstepped her bounds. Instead, He bowed slightly. "Mayfield son," he said, his English precise and thoughtful. "I must thank you." Clara blinked, thrown off balance. "Thank me, sir?" "Yes. For many years I have conducted business with men like Mr. Finch, men who believe volume equals veracity. They shout, they posture, and they assume the rest of the world is too traditional, too polite to see through their theatrics. They mistake courtesy for weakness." He paused, his gaze intense. "You, however, did not." He took a step closer. "You mentioned a bypass protocol, a protocol obcoda. These were your words. This is not a term one learns in a standard language course. It is specific, technical, and highly alarming." Clara hesitated. The skills she had just displayed were a beacon, drawing the exact kind of attention she had spent 2 years avoiding. The life she had run from was one of intrigue, of high-stakes analysis, where a single misplaced word could have dire consequences. She had sought refuge in the simplicity of service, and now that world was knocking on her door. "Sir, I may have overheard—" "You did not overhear," Mr. Tanaka interrupted gently. "You analyzed. I saw it in your eyes when you first approached our table. You were not just a server. You were assessing us. I have seen that look before, in the eyes of intelligence officers and high-level negotiators. So I will ask you directly. What do you know about Alistair Finch and his Haven project?" This was the precipice. She could retreat, feign ignorance, and perhaps salvage her quiet, anonymous life. Or she could step forward, back into the world of shadows and secrets she had so desperately tried to escape. The memory of Finch's sneering face, his utter contempt, made the decision for her. She was done hiding. "Before I worked here," she began, her voice steady, "I was a junior analyst for the State Department's Office of Economic Analysis. My portfolio included tracking illicit financial flows and technological espionage. Alistair Finch's company, OmniLink, crossed my desk more than once. There were always whispers of data insecurity, of selling aggregated, anonymized data that wasn't nearly as anonymous as promised. But we never had concrete proof." She took a breath. "When I heard his lawyer mention a bypass protocol in Russian, a language Finch clearly doesn't speak, it confirmed a pattern. Finch builds systems that appear secure to his clients and regulators, but he always leaves himself a hidden key. He isn't just building a data ecosystem in Wyoming. He's building his own private, unaccountable surveillance state, and he's looking for you to fund it." Mr. Tanaka listened without interruption, his expression unreadable, but for the intense focus in his eyes. When she finished, he was silent for a long time. "I see," he said finally. "My firm has been hesitant to invest. Mr. Finch's projections are optimistic. His reassurances about data privacy have always felt hollow. You have just provided the missing context." He reached into his jacket and produced a sleek, minimalist business card. "This is my private number. My firm, Tanaka Global, is pulling its consideration for the Haven project, effective immediately. That will represent a loss of a $2 billion initial investment for Mr. Finch." Clara stared at the card, her mind reeling. "But our business is not finished," Mr. Tanaka continued. "A person with your unique skill set, linguistics, observational analysis, a deep understanding of corporate deception, is exceptionally rare. And your courage, that is rarer still. You are wasted here, Mayfield son." He placed the card on the corner of Mr. Dubois' desk. "When you are ready to leave this place, I would like to offer you a position. Not as an analyst, but as a consultant working directly for me. We have many potential partners like Mr. Finch. I need someone who can see the truth behind the performance. I need someone who is not afraid to speak it." He bowed again, a gesture of profound respect. "You did not just save my firm from a bad investment tonight. You reminded an old man that integrity can be found in the most unexpected of places. Thank you." With that, he turned and left the office, leaving Clara standing in a stunned silence, the air thick with the scent of ozone after a lightning strike. A few moments later, Mr. Dubois re-entered, looking dazed. He glanced at Clara, then at the business card on his desk, then back at Clara. "He told me his investment group is out," Dubois said, his voice hushed with awe. "He also said if I fire you, he will personally ensure that every one of his associates in this city never sets foot in the Gilded Quill again." He shook his head slowly. "In 25 years, I have never seen anything like it." He looked at her, truly looked at her, for the first time not as an employee, but as a person. "You're not fired, Clara. Take the rest of the night off. Take the rest of the week off, if you need it." Clara nodded, her mind still struggling to catch up with the seismic shifts of the last hour. She walked out of the office, through the now calming kitchen, and into the staff locker room. She changed out of her uniform, the symbolic skin of her invisibility, and back into her own simple clothes. As she stepped out of the restaurant service entrance into the cool night air of the city, the world felt different. The anonymity she had clung to like a shield now felt like a cage she had just broken out of. But freedom, she knew, came with its own risks. Alistair Finch was not a man who would accept public humiliation and a $2 billion loss without retaliation. She had not just won a battle, she had started a war. The next few days were a strange limbo. Clara didn't go back to work, living off her meager savings and the lingering adrenaline. She expected a black SUV to appear on her street, a threatening letter in her mailbox, or a sudden, inexplicable eviction notice. Finch was a man of immense resources and minimal scruples. She knew how men like him operated. They didn't fight in the open. They dismantled their enemies from the shadows, piece by piece. On the fourth day, her phone rang. It was an unknown number. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she answered. "Miss Mayfield?" The voice was the calm, measured tone of Mr. Tanaka. "I hope I am not disturbing you." "No, sir. Not at all," she managed, her voice steadier than she felt. "I am calling with a proposal that is somewhat more urgent than our last discussion. As expected, Mr. Finch is not taking the loss of our investment gracefully. He has launched a vigorous public relations campaign. He is painting the withdrawal of my firm as a misunderstanding, a minor hiccup, and is aggressively courting other investors to fill the gap. He is moving quickly." He paused. "He is also, my sources tell me, conducting a thorough investigation into a certain waitress who publicly embarrassed him. He is looking for leverage, a way to discredit you before you can do any more damage." The cold dread she had been anticipating finally washed over her. "What does that mean for me?" "It means you are currently in a very precarious position," Tanaka said calmly. "But it also presents an opportunity. Finch's weakness is his arrogance. He believes he has contained the problem. He does not know the full extent of your capabilities. I would like to fund a small, discreet team led by you to conduct a full counter-investigation into the Haven project. I do not want to simply avoid a bad investment. I want to expose it for what it is. I want to ensure he cannot prey on the people of Havenwood or any other town." Clara was speechless. This was no longer about a consulting job. This was a mission. "Why me?" she asked, the question genuine. "You have teams of professionals, people far more experienced than I am." My professionals see balance sheets and risk assessments, Tanaka replied. They see the numbers. You see the man. You understand the human element of his deception. That is a skill that cannot be taught. I am not asking you to be an analyst, Miss Mayfield. I am asking you to be a hunter. I will provide the resources, the legal cover, anything you need. All I require is your expertise and your courage. Looking around her small, threadbare apartment, a place she had chosen specifically because it was forgettable, Clara knew her life as a ghost. The silence that followed her departure from Alistair Finch's world was not a peaceful one. It was the charged, humming silence of a high-voltage wire, a stillness pregnant with imminent, violent energy. Her life, once a meticulously constructed fortress of anonymity, had been breached. The ghost was gone, and in her place stood a target. Finch was not a man to suffer humiliation. He was a predator whose wounds only made him more vicious. Clara knew this not as an analyst, but with the primal, instinctual certainty of prey. Her quiet, threadbare apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a glass cage. Every creak of the floorboards in the hallway was the sound of approaching footsteps. Every siren wailing in the distance was a harbinger of his retribution. Sleep offered no escape, only fractured nightmares of sneering faces and languages she couldn't quite translate, a cacophony of her own fractured identity. The call from Mr. Tanaka came on the fourth day, a day when the city's oppressive humidity seemed to mirror the suffocating weight of her paranoia. His voice, calm and measured, was an anchor in her storm of anxiety. He did not speak of victory, but of consequence. "He is looking for you, Mayfield-san," Tanaka said, his tone devoid of alarm but heavy with gravity. Not with the clumsy aggression of a common bully, but with the insidious precision of a man who dismantles lives for a living. He is digging into your past, seeking the fault lines, the secrets you have buried. He intends to shatter you before you can become a credible threat. The cold dread she had anticipated was a physical thing, a shard of ice lodging itself beneath her sternum. "What does he know?" she whispered, her eyes scanning the street outside her window. "He knows you are not a waitress. He will soon know about your time at the State Department. He will twist your reasons for leaving. He will paint you as unstable, a disgruntled ex-employee with a vendetta. He will poison the well, so that if you ever speak again, your words will be dismissed as the ravings of a madwoman." It was a perfect, chilling strategy. He wasn't coming for her with thugs in the night. He was coming for her very reality, for the credibility of her own mind. The ghost she had been was a shield, but it was also a vulnerability. Who would believe an invisible woman? "But his arrogance is his undoing," Tanaka continued, his voice a steadying presence. "He believes you are alone. He believes you are a loose cannon, not the opening salvo of a coordinated attack. He is focused on silencing you, which gives us the opportunity to investigate him. I am not merely offering you a job, Miss Mayfield. I am offering you armor and a sword. I propose to fund a counter-investigation, a small surgical team with you at its head. We will not simply defend against his lies. We will unearth a truth so damning it will consume him." Clara closed her eyes, leaning her forehead against the cool glass of the window. For 2 years, she had run from the woman she used to be, the woman who lived in a world of shadows and whispers, where every relationship was a potential asset and every conversation a potential trap. The pressure, the constant vigilance, the moral compromises had hollowed her out, leaving behind a husk she had tried to bury in the simple, honest work of serving others. Now she was being asked to step back into that skin. Not as a government agent bound by protocol, but as something else. Something sharper, She looked around her small apartment, at the sparse furniture and the single, wilting plant on the sill. This wasn't a life. It was a holding pattern. A penance. Finch had already destroyed it. The only question was what would rise from the ashes. "He is coming for me whether I fight or not," she said, more to herself than to Tanaka. "My only choice is whether to be a victim or a weapon." A pause on the line, then Tanaka's quiet affirmation. "Precisely. I accept," she said, and the words did not feel heroic. They felt like a final, irrevocable surrender to a fate she had long tried to outrun. "Where do we begin?" The beginning was a sterile, anonymous office suite overlooking the East River, a place that existed on no public directory. It was a ghost space for a ghost team. Her first and, for now, only teammate was David Chen, a forensic accountant Tanaka vouched for with the simple, compelling statement, "He finds numbers that do not want to be found." David was a man who seemed to be composed entirely of quiet, precise angles. His suit was immaculate, his desk was ordered to the millimeter, and his skepticism was a palpable force in the room. He looked at Clara, with her simple clothes and the lingering exhaustion in her eyes, and she could see him cataloguing her as a liability, an unpredictable variable in his world of absolute figures. "Tanaka-san has given me the preliminary OmniLink financials," he said, his voice flat, gesturing to a series of complex charts on a large monitor. "The profit margins for the Haven project are aggressive, unrealistic even. There are offshore holding companies layered 6 deep. It's sloppy, arrogant work. I can unravel this in a month." He turned his chair to face her fully. "My question, Miss Mayfield, is what you bring to this equation that I cannot derive from the data." It was a fair question, and a necessary challenge. Clara walked over to the monitor, her eyes scanning not the numbers, but the language surrounding them. The prospectus was a masterpiece of corporate doublespeak. "You see sloppy, arrogant accounting," she began, her voice soft. "I see a linguistic fingerprint. Look here." She pointed to a footnote regarding data sovereignty. "The English phrasing is convoluted, almost deliberately ambiguous. All user-generated data will remain under the sovereign stewardship of the OmniLink ecosystem. Stewardship, not ownership. Ecosystem, not client control. It's designed to sound reassuring while legally meaning nothing." She then pointed to a different section, a technical addendum. "But this part, the description of the server architecture, is written differently. The syntax is cleaner, more direct. The terminology is highly specific. It's not written by the same legal team. It's written by an engineer who is proud of their work." She turned to David. "Your numbers will tell us but that Finch is hiding money. The language will tell us what he is hiding, who he is hiding it for, and how he's doing it. He's using multiple teams who are siloed from each other. The lawyers don't understand the tech, and the engineers don't understand the finance. The only person who speaks all 3 languages is Finch himself. That's his control mechanism, and that's his vulnerability. My job is to translate." David stared at the screen, then back at her. A flicker of something, not quite respect, but a reassessment, passed through his eyes. He nodded slowly. "Show me." For the next 2 weeks they worked in a state of hermetic, obsessive focus. David descended into the labyrinth of Finch's finances, his quiet clicks on the keyboard, a constant rhythm in the office. Clara, meanwhile, plunged back into the digital ether she had abandoned. She became a phantom, slipping through the back channels of the internet, her linguistic skills the keys to 100 locked doors. She didn't just read Russian financial forums, She adopted the cynical, slang-filled persona of a disgruntled day trader, baiting conversations about moving capital out of sanctioned territories. She didn't just scan French tech journals. She engaged in debates on encryption ethics on academic message boards, her arguments so nuanced they drew out quiet whispers about OmniLink's unconventional security protocols. She built a mosaic of rumor and speculation, each piece meaningless on its own, but together forming a chilling picture. Finch wasn't just a fraud, he was a broker. He was building a digital Switzerland, a neutral ground for data that was too illicit, too dangerous to be housed anywhere else. The real lie, she knew, was not in the global network, but in the specific. Havenwood, Wyoming. That was the heart of the deception. He's built his entire narrative around saving this town, she explained to David late one night. The city lights a galaxy of cold stars outside their window. It's a powerful story. The tech messiah, lifting up the forgotten heartland. It's the kind of story that makes people want to believe, makes them stop asking hard questions. But a narrative that perfect is always a cover for a much uglier truth. While David stayed behind to trace the money flowing to the project subcontractors, Clara flew to Wyoming. She left the ghost of the city for the ghosts of the high plains. Havenwood was a town etched with the beauty of decay. Its wide main street was a testament to a more prosperous past, the faded grandeur of its brick buildings a stark contrast to the boarded-up windows. The people were like the land itself, weather-beaten, resilient, and deeply skeptical of outsiders promising salvation. Clara shed the skin of the analyst and adopted another, a doctoral student in sociology, studying the impact of tech investment in rural America. It was a plausible cover, allowing her to ask questions without raising suspicion. She spent her days in the town's diner, her evenings in the single, dimly lit bar, listening. She learned that language was more than words. It was the cadence of a rancher's drawl, the hopeful inflection in a shopkeeper's voice, the weary silence of the unemployed men who gathered at the bar at dusk. She found her anchor in Eleanor Vance, the retired town librarian who sat on the town council. Eleanor was a woman in her 70s, with eyes that had read thousands of books and 1,000 more people. She had seen prospectors and oilmen and politicians come and go, each with their own golden promises. Alistair Finch is just the newest verse in a very old song, Eleanor told Clara one afternoon, sitting on a bench in the town square. He talks about the future, but he's using the oldest trick in the book, selling a man a picture of water when he's dying of thirst. It was Eleanor who had been stonewalled when she asked for the project's environmental impact statements and technical specifications. They sent us brochures, she said with a dry chuckle, as if pretty pictures could answer questions about water tables and electromagnetic fields. She had, however, managed to get a list of primary subcontractors before Finch's team had locked down all information. She gave the file to Clara, a thin folder filled with corporate letterheads and vague mission statements. That night, in the sterile quiet of her motel room, Clara felt the familiar thrill of the hunt. One name on the list, Viridian Dynamics, snagged in her memory. It was a name she'd seen before, years ago, in a heavily redacted intelligence brief about shell corporations used by Eastern European state actors for technology acquisition. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened her encrypted laptop and connected to the secure server in New York. She sent the name to David and began her own deep dive. The corporate veil was thick, but her past had taught her how to tear it. She cross-referenced registration agents, IP addresses from their ghost website, and the names of board members who were nothing more than paid phantoms. An hour later, David's message came through. A single, chilling sentence. The money trail for Viridian doesn't lead to a tech company. It leads to a private bank in Cyprus, known for laundering money for the SVR. The Russian Foreign Intelligence Service. The pieces didn't just click into place. They slammed together with the force of a tectonic collision. The bypass protocol, the linguistic fingerprint of the engineers, the absurd profit margins, the secrecy. The Haven project was never meant for the people of Havenwood. It was a Trojan horse, a massive, clandestine, signals intelligence and data hosting facility for a hostile foreign power, built on American soil, paid for with American investment, and hidden behind the desperate hopes of a dying American town. Finch wasn't just committing treason for profit. He was auctioning off a piece of the nation's soul. A sudden, sharp knock on her motel room door made her heart seize. It wasn't the police. It wasn't room service. It was the sound of the world ending. She swept her laptop into her bag, her mind racing. The window, the back alley. "Ms. Mayfield?" A calm, cultured voice called through the door, a voice she recognized. It was the smooth, Muscovite accent of Ivan Kozlov, Finch's lawyer. "We know you're in there. Alistair would like a word. He's on the line." This was worse than thugs. This was a psychological attack. He was showing her his reach, his precision. He could find her anywhere. He could touch her anywhere. She remained silent, her back pressed against the wall, her breath held tight in her chest. "He's very disappointed, Clara." Koslov's voice oozed through the wood. "He thought you were just a clever girl who got lucky. He didn't realize you were a professional. He finds that so much more insulting. He asked me to tell you that he knows about the incident in Istanbul, the one that prompted your resignation from the State Department, the one that's still classified. He wonders how the good people of Havenwood would feel if they knew their sociology student was responsible for getting a promising young asset killed." The blood drained from her face. Istanbul. The memory was a raw, festering wound she had never allowed herself to touch. A miscalculation. A linguistic nuance she had misinterpreted. A young Turkish journalist, her source, taken in the night. His face, full of hope and trust, was the ghost that had haunted her into hiding. Finch wasn't just threatening to expose her. He was wielding her deepest shame as a weapon. He was telling her that her past failures invalidated her present truth. A cold, clarifying rage burned through the fear. He had made the same mistake he'd made in the restaurant. He had assumed her past was a weakness, a source of shame to be exploited. He didn't understand that it was a crucible. It had forged her. It was the very reason she could not, would not, back down. The ghost of the man she had failed in Istanbul demanded it. She walked to the door, her movements deliberate. She didn't open it. She spoke through it, her voice steady and clear. "Tell Mr. Finch," she said, pitching her voice to be heard by Koslov and anyone else listening, "that the difference between him and me is that I live with my mistakes. His are about to be put on public display." She didn't wait for a reply. She grabbed the heavy fire extinguisher from the wall. They expected her to cower or to run. They didn't expect her to fight. She smashed the base of the extinguisher through the flimsy drywall next to the doorframe, then again and again, creating a jagged hole. As they began to force the door, she scrambled through the opening into the adjoining room, which she knew from the fire escape plan was empty for renovations. She didn't flee into the night. She climbed onto the scaffolding outside the window and made her way to the roof. From there, under the vast, star-dusted Wyoming sky, she watched them storm her empty room. She had the proof. She had the memory card with the files. And now, she had a reason that transcended her own survival, the final confrontation was not in a courtroom or a congressional hearing. That would come later, a dry, procedural epilogue to the real story. Tanaka, with the quiet, ruthless efficiency of the truly powerful, arranged the real ending. He called Finch, informing him that a new, anonymous investor was willing to exceed Tanaka Global's original offer. But this investor, a reclusive European billionaire, insisted on a face-to-face meeting. The location, a private dining room at the Gilded Quill. Finch, blinded by the chance to not only recoup his loss but to triumph, agreed without hesitation. When he strode into the room, he found no European billionaire. He found only Mr. Tanaka, sitting calmly at the head of the table, and Clara standing by the window, looking out at the city lights. The scene was a haunting echo of their first encounter, but the power dynamics had been fundamentally, seismically altered. Finch stopped, his face a mask of fury. "You!" he spat at Clara. "What is this? Some kind of pathetic theatrics?" "Think of it as a performance review, Alistair," Clara said, turning from the window. She was not in a uniform. She wore a simple dark dress, and her hair was down. She looked him in the eye, and for the first time, he saw not a waitress, not a ghost, but the sum of all her parts. "You were so concerned with my education. I thought it was only fair to show you what I've learned." She gestured to the chair opposite her. "Please, sit." He remained standing, vibrating with rage. "I will destroy you. I will erase you. That file on your past is just the beginning." "Istanbul," Clara said, her voice quiet but carrying the weight of a confession. "Yes, I failed. I made a mistake, and a good man died. I have lived with that every single day. It's the reason I hid myself away, believing I didn't deserve to have a voice. But you, Alistair, you taught me something. You taught me that the only thing worse than a mistake is a deliberate act of evil. You're not just a fraud, you're a traitor, and you're not even a particularly good one." She began to walk slowly around the table, her voice a calm, dissecting scalpel. "You built your empire on an illusion of control, but you control nothing. You're a slave to your own ego. You had to have this restaurant, this wine, this public display of dominance, because you are terrified that without them, people will see you for what you are, a hollow man. Your lawyer, Koslov, doesn't respect you. He manages you for his real clients. Your COO, Vance, doesn't admire you. She loathes you for what you did to her family, and she has been quietly feeding information to David Chen for the past 2 weeks." Finch's face went slack, the blood draining from it. "And your partners," Clara continued, her voice dropping, "the ones you're building your little spy haven for in Wyoming. They don't see you as an ally. They see you as a tool, a disposable asset, and they are about to discover that their asset has become a liability." Tanaka slid a tablet across the table. On the screen was a live feed from a major news network. The headline read, "Tech billionaire Alistair Finch, linked to Russian intelligence in Wyoming data center. Scandal. Federal warrants issued." Finch stared at the screen, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He looked from the tablet to Clara, his eyes wide with a dawning, animal terror. The arrogance was gone, stripped away to reveal the pathetic, frightened core she had seen on that first night. "You see?" Clara said, her voice softening now, not with pity, but with a profound, final clarity. "The languages, the analysis, the time I spent in the shadows, those weren't the weapons that defeated you. My real weapon was the one thing you never thought to look for. The one thing you could never understand. Empathy. I listened to the people of Havenwood. I understood their hopes and their fears. I saw the librarian who just wanted to protect her town. I saw the waitress who just wanted to be invisible. You see people as objects, as liabilities and assets. And that is why you will always, always lose to someone who sees them as human. He finally collapsed into the chair, a puppet with its strings cut. He didn't speak. He just stared into the abyss that had opened up beneath him. The federal agents who entered the room moments later took a broken man into custody. 6 months later, Clara stood on a wind-swept bluff overlooking Havenwood. The skeletal structure of the Omni Link facility had been dismantled. In its place, ground had been broken for a new community college and technology center, funded by a consortium Tanaka had assembled. Eleanor Vance was the chairperson of the board. "The air is clearer here," a familiar voice said. Mr. Tanaka had come to stand beside her, his quiet presence a comfort against the vastness of the landscape. "It is," Clara agreed. She felt it in her lungs, in her very soul. The ghost had been laid to rest. "The foundation I spoke of is ready to launch," he said. "Its mission will be to fund investigative journalism and provide legal support for whistleblowers, to empower the people who see the truth but lack the voice to speak it. The directorship is still yours if you want it." She looked at the town below, at the nascent structure that represented not just a new building, but a renewed hope. She thought of her years in the shadows at the State Department, and her years in the different shadows of the Gilded Quill. They were not separate lives. They were chapters in the same book. "I accept," she said, "on one condition." Tanaka smiled, a rare, genuine expression of warmth. "Name it." "The Foundation's headquarters," she said, her gaze sweeping across the valley, a place that had been the site of her greatest fear and her greatest victory. "It won't be in New York or Tokyo. It will be right here." It was not just a choice of location. It was a statement of purpose. Her work would not be done from a place of power and prestige, but from the heartland, from the very ground where truth had been threatened and where courage had taken root. She was no longer a ghost, fleeing a past she couldn't escape. She was a guardian, building a future she had earned. She had learned to speak 5 languages, but now, finally, she was fluent in her own, and she had a world of stories left to tell.